let's get started with what not to do first. You can see my eraser mark from earlier. Erasers really change the sheen of this paper. So if you erase, just know that it's probably going to leave a mark. The scratch board that I'm using has a matte finish. There is scratch paper available and it's very glossy. I find that my students damage it too easily. It's very delicate. It's cheaper though, so if you need to practice, it's good practice. So students transfer it just fine, usually, and get most of their image. Many of them forget to put where value change is happening, so make sure you do that with a dotted line. Especially anywhere where there's soft edges, a dashed line is best. This is what we're going for, is kind of a soft look, but a lot of people just make it real chunky and just scrape it off like they're gonna find a $100 lottery ticket or something. It's not a lottery ticket, although it scratches in a similar fashion. And they just say, oh, it's light, so I'm just gonna just scratch it all away. It's not digging up a hole. It's not just digging a hole. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to tear your paper. You're going to get holes in it. It's going to look rough and ragged if you just carve into it. Don't treat it like that. It will destroy it. So turn your blade and make a mark on a scratch piece of paper. Every time you turn your blade, it gets a little different angle and gives you a different mark. So get it to where the angle is giving you a hair-like mark. Really thin, fine, even marks. There are ways to turn the blade where you get that chunky line, but I think in the hands of a beginner, it can get away from them. See? Big chunky marks. If you haven't watched the hatching video yet, I talk a lot about the method of hatching on my pen lesson. So I'm using the same technique for hatching here that I use when I'm working with a pen. So I'll try to put that in the link below, a link to that below. So what we're doing is we're treating it like rain. The more rain in this instance, the more hatching, the more lines, the lighter the value becomes. So overlapping will give you a stronger highlight, and spacing them out will allow you to have a darker value left. So we're revealing our highlights, but it's very slow. If you're using stippling, it's going to be even slower. But if you have trouble controlling your line when it comes to hatching, stippling may be the safer option for you. But just like driving a car, driving safer often means going slower. So you're going to go a little bit slower, but you'll probably get where you're wanting to go. As I want the value to become darker, I will space my dashes, my dots out. And I'm just doing little mini value scales here at the top, proving that I can create a variety of value using these two different methods. I am I'm tapping my paper a little bit, but I'm also making sure I do a teeny little scratch. It's difficult to explain that. But if you've scratched off a lottery ticket ever, or any anything like that, then it is similar. But I think sometimes when I say that, students want to just kind of, with all abandonment, just scratch the snot out of it. So I'm just about done with this value scale. You can see that I'm doing a really small one because I can prove that I know how to do this with a very small little patch. I don't have to do a 12-inch value scale to prove that. So just a little bit of proof that I can handle both of those things. And I'm going to show you how to transfer this image. If you have your drawing that you want to put on the Scratchboard ready on your sketchbook paper, grab your graphite stick or a 6B pencil, like a dark drawing pencil. Graphite stick is just faster because it's a big chunk of lead. So I'm going to cover the back of my image, whether it's a drawing or a printed image like this. This is just a printed image I found on the internet of a pear. Just a simple object. Get a good coverage, about like that. Not a lot of white gaps showing. Now flip it over and lay it out like you want it to appear on your image or on your Scratchboard. I don't recommend taping it to the surface because it can pull off the black ink or the black surface of the Scratchboard. And I use an ink pen. You can use a pencil or just press if you want to. If this is an original drawing that you've done and you don't want to destroy it with a pen, then just press. The pressure will transfer that graphite onto the Scratchboard without destroying your image. Anywhere there's a soft value change, I use a dotted line so that when I'm working in those areas, I know to keep the edges soft. So I'm gonna vary my hatching length in those areas and overlap and weave it together differently in that area than I do a hard edge or a crisp edge, whatever you want to call it, a sharp transition. But I think I've kind of mapped everything out, and now my real work begins. So that transferred really well. I have no eraser marks, no little greasy spots from messing up. So our real focus is not how to draw at this stage. We already know how to draw. We are focusing on how to draw using different media. Now, I showed you this smudge earlier that I had done, and this is how I did it. If you just try to erase even a little bit, it's not like, oh, I'll just barely do it. Look, it already pulls off some of the ink from this scratch paper, and it looks terrible. Now, that's something you can correct on a digital image. So if you accidentally get a smudge on yours and it's a good portfolio piece that you want to use, you can always scan it and work on it in Photoshop and get it cleaned back up. So I know accidents happen, but don't on purpose erase it. So after seeing this, you don't have any reason, no excuses about that, because it can be avoided. So just try. I did see a little bit of a little bounce back from the light, a little reflective light on the bottom of that pear. So I like to address that because it really gives it an an illusion of realism. And I observe it. So this pear must be sitting on a surface that is bouncing light onto the bottom of it. So if I observe it and I think it's there when I squint and I can't unsee it, then I'm going to record it to the best of my ability. So that's what I will look for. So I start out in my most light areas, just like in pen, you start off in your darker areas, your safer areas. If I were to accidentally get a line that maybe my blade got a thicker angle on it and gave me kind of one of those thick lines I talked about earlier, there's a better chance that I can hide it in a light area than a dark area. So that's one reason I encourage you to start with areas that are lighter. I also have a little paper near me. I usually have a paper beside me, like a little scrap piece of paper, that I can turn my blade till I find the line that I want. And when I have that angle, I just hold it like that and then go straight to my drawing. I'm pausing every once in a while just to look at my reference image. Every time you look away, you forget a little bit. And if you're like me, you might forget a lot. So I have to look at my reference image often. I stop and check and I squint. Okay, what's showing up on my reference? What's really standing out? Where are the areas of highest contrast that I really need to tackle? That's what I'm trying to look at when I squint. These look much more convincing when you take a picture of them with your phone, something like that condenses the image. Those lines kind of fuse together and really create a bold, dramatic statement. But when you're looking at it this close, I mean, my nose is almost on this pear. You can't tell from this video, but I'm very close to this, and I'm hanging onto this paper pretty tight with my fingers, trying to go as fast as I can to show how I kind of attack a little piece like this. But really, to appreciate the work that you're doing, you need to get away from it just to see if your values are translating. I suggest about 6 foot at least. That's a comfortable distance to view your artwork. And most people who view it aren't going to get their nose right in it. I hope. So, see what it looks like from that distance. And if it looks good to you from that distance, and if it's coming together, then you can proceed with a little more confidence. Instead of being like, oh no, it looks like there's so many lines and you can see the lines. Don't worry. Our brains are so wonderfully made that we just click that all together when we step back from it. It just fuses all together and we understand what it's supposed to be. I do have to deal with the background. That's what I'm thinking about right now. What should I do? I'm going to try to keep the same angle. If you can't keep the same angle in other areas when you're doing hatching because of this issue, see, I'm trying to get close to this edge without leaving a little dark halo around it. And it is tricky. If you can't keep that same angle, then at least keep the same angle in each area you're working. So the positive space of the pear I would keep it the same angle. If I needed to switch directions on the background, then I could switch directions on the background. That is a personal suggestion from me. If you hate the way that looks, of course don't do it, but I find it's a little less distracting if you organize it that way than if you just switch directions mid-background and just hack away at it. So if you can do a little planning beforehand, I guess that would always be best. You can see that this particular scratch paper that I'm using does have, the white underneath of it is pretty glossy. So it's giving a little shimmer. When I introduce this to my classes, they usually like, oh yeah, I did that when I was little. My grandma gave me some paper and it had rainbow underneath and like a glittery surface. Those are really fun. For really any age. Kids don't grow out of that. Adults don't grow out of that. I love that paper too. When I'm teaching traditional drawing, it's a little distracting to have all that color underneath, but it is fun. Now, I'm not going to show this today, but if you want to go over your drawing with Sharpie, I've seen students do that, and it's pretty cool too. So they actually color it afterwards with Sharpie, and it turns out. I just got to give a lot of credit to my high school students because they experiment and they try new things and they're curious about what it's going to look like and have I tried this? So I get to see a lot of wonderful experimentation and risk-taking, some mistakes, but I'm happy to let them try, especially if they have a really exciting idea that they just can't shake out of their heads. Then it's better just to let them try it out. And I've seen some good ones like that use the marker. I don't have much work to do on the cast shadow, so that's nice. So if you're choosing an image for these, I suggest choosing an image that is kind of dramatically dark, that it has some really, really bold bolds. It has some really high contrast. Look for a high contrast image. And if you come up with one, or if you draw one and it's a little bit on the low end of contrast, take a photo of it, edit it, or darken the darks and get rid of some mid-tone. It just translates better into this media if it doesn't have a lot of just flat, gray, mid-tone values. You want that kind of Caravaggio-esque drama when it comes to scratch art. It looks good and it saves you some time because you're not having to develop so many values. Pop in your lights, you leave the darks, and call it done. I have a little bit of a turn on my angle of my scratch tool now. Mainly because my hand hurts because I've been doing this for a little bit and I'm ready to take away a little bit more. It's quite a long time to do that same motion. So it gets a little repetitive when you're kind of not allowed to stop or take a break. You can see I'm going over my pear at the same time as I do this background. You can see my blade crosses over into that light side of the pear. Mainly because those two values, the background value and the foreground light side of the pear, are so similar in value. I would call them siblings on the value scale. They're very closely related. So as I lighten one, I can lighten the other and keep their relationship intact. One will still stay lighter than the other because every time I go back and give a new layer, I give a new layer to both. Checking my reference, squinting, seeing where mine is not matching my reference, cleaning up sharp edges right here where it got a little lumpy and bumpy from my line work, polishing this edge, giving it one layer extra. I have a lot of that dust now I've developed, so I'm just brushing it away. Fingers are a little dirty from it too. Hey, that's the art room for you. Okay, I'm going to pop in that little highlight right there at the top. Try not to get rid of the little cast shadow that the stem gives, that right side of the pear. It's small, but it's important. It tells a lot about that area, and it tells a lot about the direction of the light source and how strong the light source is. Shadows tell us a lot, so we don't want to neglect those. Squinting, checking, kind of pausing. Got a little bit of a, halo around this one, so I want to soften that. I'm not scratching off the background all the way to the edge for this. I try to always leave about 1/4 of an inch around any artwork, really, just for framing purposes. So not only to frame it comfortably without covering up your artwork, but also to always have a place for your fingers so you can hold on to it without damaging your artwork or touching all over it if possible. Now this little study, this little practice is, I don't know, about the size of an index card. It's about 1/4 of a piece of a sheet of this scratch paper, just so we can get some experience. There's no need in wasting a whole sheet of this. Just for a little study like this. And I always start with my little value scale at the top first. If I destroy that, I can just cut off the top of that and try again before I get into, a little pear study or a sphere or something simple with a simple light source. Well, that's it. If you like these tips, hit like. If you want to hear more from Day and Night Studio, please subscribe.